What's up, everyone? Give me a shout out if you can hear me in the chat. I want to make sure that all the audio is working, or if it's not loud enough, let me know as well. Anybody hear me out there? Throw something in the chat, thumbs up, whatever. All right, I'm sure I'll get some feedback as we keep going here. Great, awesome. Let me know if there are any problems or if I'm buzzing out or anything like that. So we'll go ahead and get started. Let's see here, ground rules. I don't know, there is really no ground rules for this. We're gonna take some questions and talk about it as a community, and I'll give you the best answers I have at this point in time. And if you've got some questions, you can definitely throw them in the chat here. I'm also going to try and source some questions from the Helium Discord. Everybody there has got very strong shoulders because they've been patiently answering the same questions over and over. So that's what we're going to try and do, is eliminate some of the toil out of this by answering the easiest questions. A lot of you are just joining this and you don't know anything. So we got to remember to start from that beginner mindset in here. So that's what we're going to roll with. All right, so first question that I see in the chat is, how is the Nielsen antenna? So the results on that so far have not been great. Again, so far. I got chatted recently by one of the people that did a really popular article on where to place your hotspots, and he suggested that it isn't that the best. And so he had data to back it up. His friend had data to back it up. That's where he got his data from. And it just hasn't been showing too well, I guess, in his opinion. So I was like, I want to give it a chance here too. So I've noticed it's more consistent. So with the Rack 8 DBI, I have seen my peaks and valleys in earnings is just really volatile. But by and large, maybe I think a little bit higher with the Rack 8 DBI. And with the Nielsen, it's been slowly trickling down. Now, I attribute that to growth of the network, but then also I've lost a couple witnesses. So I just posted a video yesterday of some problem in my setup where my antenna was leaning towards the south, and that may have affected some earnings. And I think I saw some improvement right away yesterday. I think I was improved my average, or off my average by a few HNT for the day. So, all right, how many hotspots do I have around me? Oh my gosh. I know they just released the rankings for the cities, and I live in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area. And so they had, by that count, 392 hotspots that are in the whole metro suburbs area. So there's a lot to choose from. Of course, witnesses stopped being recorded at about 25. That used to be like, what, 5 or 6 or something like that. And then they increased it. So, but remember, there's a kind of a curve off as far as getting to 3 to 5 witnesses. Is kind of starts to max out. And of course, you get 25, great. If you feel differently about that, throw that in the comments and we can talk about that. So, earning differences, I'm assuming that this is related to between the Nielsen and the Rack 8 DBI. Now, I got to go back in time because all that volatility and all my experiments were over the winter season. They were about a month and a half ago. And then, of course, since then, the network has probably added a third of the hotspots to its total. So it can pollute the results. So there's a lot of context that I'm like, maybe if I try a few more things. But this kind of gets on to one of the other things I wanted to talk about, are what are the weak spots in my setup right now. And one of the biggest ones is my my cable length from, because I have my miner is indoor. I am not putting it out on my mast because miners are still in short supply. If my hotspot goes down, if it gets broke, if water gets in there and just busts it, I am going to have to go to, eBay or ask if I can get the people's hotspot back for a little bit or something like that. Like, it would be really tough. So I really want to protect that until I have more miners at my disposal. So that's the cable length is one of the weak points that I'm having to accept right now, because if it lowers my earnings, that's fine, because I don't want that miner to go down. Let's see here. And so that creates loss in the signal. So I'm losing, my cable is about 32 feet long, and then with a lightning arrestor in the middle. And that is contributing to loss. Now, I have the Nearson, so a bigger DPI, you'd think that, well, there's some compensation in there. So take it or leave it. That's kind of one of the weak spots. I just got called out yesterday by apparently somebody else who lives around in the Minneapolis area, and they said that my grounding cable or my grounding rod that I drove in, a lot of times you don't want to have multiple grounding rods in your setup, or if you do, they need to be linked. And I remember this back to when I was volunteering to do some audio work, and there was a continuous ground hum in the audio system, and it was very frustrating to get out. So that made me think, okay, I gotta look at my setup again, because that might be contributing. I'm running all Ethernet to my miners, or my one miner, and I prefer Ethernet any day. I just don't trust Wi-Fi enough for, especially not that I'm saying that this is happening, but part of me wants to believe that if I had a choice in designing a consensus system, that I would prefer the hotspots that are connected via Ethernet versus Wi-Fi. But that's not in there. That would be an interesting thing to think about. But there are some applications where you just have to go Wi-Fi. So maybe that's kind of something to think about. All right. Next question. Does this go against my ISP's terms of service? Not that I'm aware of, but there are a lot of peer-to-peer networks. I know that some ISPs will clamp down on that. I don't think that is the case here. Of course, if they start sensing that there's some problems in there, and that this could be something that could take away their ability to provide service or be a competition, then they might squash it. But by and large, there's still a backbone there of service that is important that people aren't interested in. I think that they're just not. Maybe they don't consider it a threat right now. I'm not sure, but not. I guess right now I don't think that that's a problem. But it could be different around the world too. I don't know. Have I been part of Consensus Group Rewards? Yes. Oh my gosh. It is so exciting when I am part of Consensus. I do a dance, I tell my wife, and I just act really weird around the house because it's exciting when you're part of Consensus. I'm going to miss the fact that that's moving off hotspots. I wish that there was some way that we could reuse that computing power that's across the whole network. It's a little bit of computing power with a Raspberry Pi. I've thought about some ways that maybe there's a way that we can figure out how to do that. But Consensus, I like this question that just came up. How do you take part of Consensus? You can't really take part in it right now, or by the current design. It is a randomly elected process. So out of the 25,000 hotspots there are right now, a handful get elected to Consensus randomly. There's no way to control it. That would be bad if there was, because then the system could be rigged, right? So no, there's nothing. It's supposed to be random. That's the intention, and it's 6% of all the awards. So there's I think 5 million HNT that are minted per month, and so 6% of that is reserved for Consensus. And validation is really, really important. That makes sure that there's a lot of integrity in the network. So you cannot game the system in regards to Consensus. but it is a lot of fun. I think I've been elected to consensus probably a half dozen times. Sometimes it's for very short epochs, and others it's gone on for maybe 2 hours. And those are the really fun ones, because then you're just like showering in HNT, and it's very exciting. And like I said, I'm going to miss this when it moves off the consensus by the hotspots and moves on to validators. I know that staking is a way to get at that. I believe staking is going to be for 10,000 HNT to stake on a validator. Of course, you have to have a really good internet connection to do that. They're really recommending, like, what is it? Amazon's cloud solutions, or just cloud solutions in general, to be the backbone for that. Just to provide that integrity, because then I learned something else, and call me out here if this is wrong, but I saw it and I was like, oh, I think that makes sense. So I think challenges are going to be made by the validators instead. So lone wolves are not going to make any more HNT. So this is a problem for a lone wolf setup. Man, that's tough, because I have one lone wolf right now, and then another one that is my prominent one. And so that's gonna affect earnings for my lone wolf. So what that means is I'm just gonna have to start working on my network and using some of the hotspots that I have on order to put around that and build a little network. So let's see here. Do I think having will hurt all of us? So I can't speak to crypto as much. This is my first foray into crypto, and I had to look up what a halving was and learn about it probably by some of you out there as well. From what I've gathered, at least when halvings have happened before, is that it's generally a good thing. So as we see right now with the price of HNT, it's what, tripled, quadrupled, quintupled? Yeah, quintupled since I first became a part of it. And the idea, if your HNT rewards are halving in August, ideally your the HNT that is minted, although less, it's going to be twice as valuable, if not more. This is a project, and there's lots of volatility in crypto, but I guess that's the theory behind it, and it creates scarcity, and there's economic models that I'm not aware of, and I'm probably just like it sounds like I'm making this stuff up. Really, I just don't understand all of it, and I'm learning just as much as the rest of you. Or you're probably might be some of you out there that are like crypto geniuses, and you understand all this stuff and could definitely share it with me and the community. I'm sure there's tons of YouTube videos out there as well that would cover it. I've got lots of things I'm juggling in life, and so trying to make time to learn all of this stuff is I've got a backlog, so I got to manage that backlog and figure out which things I'm going to learn first. So, as always, I'll try and share everything I can as we go forward. So, let's see here. Looking through the comments here. If there's any plans to allow people to make and monetize their own packet forwarder. I am not sure about the monetization side of it. I know that people can make packet forwarders on their own, and that's something that's really cool. Like if I step back a few months to before, what was it, HIP 17, HIP 19, the one that made the manufacturers had to tighten up. That was due in part to people gaming the system, making their own components, and it's even almost like back to 3D printing. Like it's awesome that you could make something yourself and contribute to something greater and be a part of it, and then you don't have to worry about as much about supply chains or really trying to refine what you've got that you can make on your own. I really like that idea, and also when it starts getting gamed, it undermines the system. So that's why the change had to be made, and that was frustrating for a lot of people. a lot of people, because we all had miners on order, and then we waited, and then we kept waiting, and then we waited some more, and some of us are still waiting today. So definitely understand that frustration out there. Let's see here. Next question. Have I gotten to investing in other crypto assets through HNT? So I did start taking some HNT and diversifying it. I'm not going to speak to which ones of those that are out there that I've invested in, but I remember from the 5th grade, I looked at various stocks, and we did the stock trading thing that everybody seems to do when they're at that age. And so back then, of course, the Chicago Bulls were really, really popular. And then Nike with the Air Jordans. And so I'm like, I'm going to invest in Nike. And so I did. I made some fake money doing that at a 5th grade exercise. So I'm kind of doing that with crypto. Like, oh, I like that. That seems to be really volatile, or this seems to be something that's interesting. I like the ideas here. So it's kind of just experimenting and seeing what the projects are and what they're backing, and getting to know more about them. But yeah, right away I kind of said, these kind of look fun. I'm going to throw some, and it's like $20. I can throw the thing on there, and am I willing to lose $20? It's kind of like a gamble. Some people go to the casinos and do that. This seems like an interesting gamble. I'll throw $20 at a crypto. Of course, there's a huge amount of them out there too. So, but yeah, good question. Next one, can you explain to properly set up a RP SMA lightning arrestor adapter and where to buy? So I've only done N-type ones. In fact, I have a couple right here that I think, yeah, here's 2 of them in different forms to connect. So these are, let's see here. These are N-type ones though. Excuse me while I make a lot of noise while I'm unwrapping these. I like how these are triple packaged. So I've been buying mine from Amazon. If you know where else to buy them, such that local manufacturers or something like that, drop a link in there and be happy to share that out. Or if you think that the quality of stuff on Amazon is not good, throw it in the comments. So this is my female to female N-type lightning arrestor. And actually I have some other cables right here. So these are 5-foot cables from USA Coax that, again, I have an N-type male on there, so that my female end would screw right into here. And then, of course, if I was continuing on that connection, I would screw it onto both sides. Now, here's one thing that I do want to call out here. So I'm going to hold this up, and these may look, and I don't have the ability to focus here, so with this camera, I'm working on that as well. But these may not look any different, but I tell you, they are. And this, I don't remember which one. One of these is SMA, and one of them is RP SMA. So I think that this one is a tad bit smaller. So big difference. And this actually cost me, a day and a half of being down. I had to wait on an adapter from Amazon because I ordered an SMA adapter, or an SMA cable to connect to my miner, and it was RP SMA. And I know another person who did this, and then they ordered still the wrong adapter again, and then I had to wait. And so I lost on probably, 15 to 20 HNT in one or 2 days, maybe even more. So be aware of this. Second guess yourself, ask multiple times. And if you have to get an adapter, or if you want to just plan on being wrong, Amazon does have an adapter package that has a bunch of adapters in there for whatever the case could be wrong. It will definitely pay for itself when you have it on hand and you're down, and you just go to that little pack and put on your little adapter just till you figure out the system. Okay, what else? Okay, one more thing on the lightning arrestor is you want to have those as far down as possible. If you're going from your cable into your home, you want to have that down as far as possible. So it doesn't do much good to be up at the top, like between your antenna and your hotspot. If you have an enclosure, well, then that might make a little bit more sense, but you usually want that as low as possible. And as I looked up, these lightning arresters are bidirectional. So that means that if you have say, and it's whatever you want to do, like you get to make the decisions here, but if you had one at the top and one at the bottom, regardless of where the discharge went through the system, it would accept it from either way, I believe. And let's see here. The key thing here, though, is connecting this one. And I don't have the cable here to show you how to connect that, but this is where you slide in that grounding cord. And lightning, I would say that lightning is going to fry almost everything in your setup, almost guaranteed. We can try and persuade the lightning to go in different ways if possible by using these, but it still could ruin your system. And even if something does hit it or it shorts out, you need to have these as backups as well. So order a couple. Don't just have one, because again, you go down and you're just like me with that little adapter. You're up a creek, you're screwed, or whatever you want to call it. You're going to be sad. How about that? All right. Any other projects like Helium, like peer-to-peer or IoT? I am not aware of any. I am vaguely aware that people have told me that there are other projects like this. My brother has been kind of aware in this space for quite a while before I was, although he wasn't aware of Helium. So I'm trying to get him into Helium as well, and sharing the results. So let's see here. Remote hotspots with power and 4G SIM cards. That's an excellent question. I don't have any information on that. There's a lot of questions that I haven't grown my network to speak to that eloquently or with intelligence. So I am not aware of what that is. I did see a link on how to, or somebody chatted on Discord about a solar power setup. And so I cached that and emailed it to myself. And I don't have the email up right now, but I could throw that in the links below as well. But that seemed to be a really good write-up. I think that it was somebody in the UK. So moving some of that over and figuring out how to do it. But that would be a cool little setup that I'd love to do an experiment with and see what it would be like to set up a completely solar powered setup. And then, yeah, the 4G SIM cards, I'm not sure how that would work. I had another interesting idea, and maybe this is where the first little tests will be with Helium as they're experimenting with this 5G network. And let's say if you had a hotspot that didn't have an internet connection, maybe this is where the packet forwarders are going to serve as the kind of the middleman. Is that they will be able, so if we could use one antenna to forward the communications, like we have a really good antenna here, but it doesn't have internet. And then we have another antenna that is connected to internet. And then maybe they could talk to each other and send the data back and forth, saying that I understand that this one doesn't have internet, but this one does, so I can send my data back to that one. And maybe, I don't know, mining rewards are decreased because of that. I don't know how the economics of that would work, but it'd be an interesting idea to be able to send so that you could kind of maybe along a highway or a narrow mountain pass or something like that, be able to daisy chain these hotspots together with antennas so that you could only have one of them connected to the internet. Of course, one hotspot is doing about 30 gigabytes of data, so there might be a limit on that, and of course it's going to funnel traffic to that location as well. So something to think about. Again, this is just me thinking off the top of my head. I don't know if that's what they're intending in the future. Next question. Hey Ed, great videos. Maybe you've answered this before, but I noticed you running an 8-9 dBi antenna versus a 5-6 dBi antenna. Does not have a very narrow range? Yeah, so call me beginner's mindset and me being attracted to the hype of the higher dBi. I think when I was looking at antennas last fall, I originally saw like all the people that were in my network were getting Nielsen 9 dBi antennas, and so I was like, okay, that must be the best. So I'll just kind of do what they did, and so that's why I ordered 2, and then they went out of supply, and I had to wait like a month and a half. So I'm like, well, I'm not earning anything right now having the stock antenna, so I'm going to order what I can. And so I just picked the Rack 8 dBi. I don't know if it was what was available right then now, but I would love to, in going forward, get all the Rack antennas, 3, the 5.8, and then the 8, and compare them, and then share those results. The thing is, everybody asks, well, what's the best antenna? And that's not the right question, because it's very contextual. It all depends on how close your hotspots are, how high you have the antenna, what's the line of sight to the other hotspots. Do they have antennas? Are you above the roof lines? Are you above the treetops? All of that stuff factors in to the complex question of what's the best antenna. I would say you're not understanding how the antenna works and the influences into that related to earnings. I will say one thing to look at is the RSSI, and there's one other SNR. I can't remember what they're called, but looking at those values, and they're in your witnessing when you get witnessed and when others witness you, those details are in those. And another site that, again, I should drop the link for, I think it's Wishplorer is the person that put it together, and it does an amazing job of graphing out your witnesses, and if you had invalid ones, if you failed beacons challenges. And it's really great for just kind of understanding what's happening with your antenna and if there's some room. And then there's this other chart that has the RSSI and whatever other values that you can kind of, okay, I'm at this value, XY axis, and it's in here and it's green. So that means it's really good. Whereas if over here you're really close to the red, well, then that might be something that you need to improve. And then so you can use those results to think about how great your setup if you're making changes. And it would be really cool to have some sort of trending of when you do make a change, that you can kind of make a notation there and note what you did at that point. Like me yesterday, well, I straightened my antenna a little bit more, and now it would be contextually important, because then I could know, I made these things better, but then it had some consequence here, or by and large, it all went down or something like that. So then you could have a little bit more indication of how you're doing. Of course, there's other things that I just noticed the other day. I had like a 4 HNT day, and that's like really, really low for me. And so I know it was very, very windy that day. And I've heard some people say, weather is an impact. Well, somehow my data is, and maybe it is because just in my location, I have trees around me. And so if they're moving, maybe that messes up the signals a little bit more, because it's supposed to bounce off things. Have I had any problems with syncing or a miner suddenly go offline? Yes. I've only really dealt with the original hotspots, the white ones. One, not really up mine, but my lone wolf suddenly dropped offline. And so I went through all sorts of diagnostics on it. And I was like, unplug it. Because I was helping the host. I was telling them unplug it, and they had no idea what they were doing. They're just doing what I said. So I'm like, well, let's unplug it for a bit. and then plug it back in. So it was about 30 seconds to a minute. And that still wasn't working. And I was like, okay, well, and it's on Wi-Fi. So I was like, well, reboot the router. Maybe that caused a problem. Try that. No. Well, okay, so now that we rebooted the router, let's reboot the hotspot again, see what happens. Nothing like was affecting this hotspot. It was effectively down and it wasn't coming back. And I know that there's some delay of when you get it back and working to when it shows up on Helium Explorer. So I got to a point where I was like, I don't know what else to do. I'm going to try out this Helium hotspot utility. And so as soon as we got that downloaded and connected up to the hotspot, I don't even know if we did the diagnostic run, or maybe we did. And then all of a sudden it just turned on. It started working again. And I believe the firmware was up to date on it as well. So I don't know what happened, but it did seem to get stuck for some reason. But that was the process. So the Helium hotspot utility, I know that it seems like they're working to move a lot of that functionality into the Helium app itself. I would really recommend that as a diagnostic tool. That diagnostic run has been very, very helpful for me helping others. They've sent me screenshots of that to help diagnose. And I've noticed a lot of people haven't set up they're either on Wi-Fi and it's very spotty Wi-Fi and they didn't even know it. Also, they haven't set up their port forwarding. So that has maybe caused some issues. So I really encourage them to set up the port forwarding so that works better for them. So it's a bit of hit and miss, but every single time that I've gotten these working again, it's just taken time and persistence, and also a little bit more patience, because it seems like we've done everything we can to get this up and working right now. Let's just wait a few hours and see what happens. Especially if it's it's got to sync back up to the blockchain. Well, then you're kind of you kind of have to wait on the network to get all that data. So, any thoughts on the Proxcast 10 dBi antenna or plans to test one? I just heard about some 10 dBi antennas. I think the host of the People's Hotspot is actually at one of their hosts. They're doing that. I don't know if it's the Proxicast one, but there is a 10 dBi antenna involved. So I'll ask them about it. And we were even willing to maybe swap antennas so that we could do a little bit more testing with it. But haven't seen it, didn't know about it. I'll probably look it up after this. How important grounding the antenna if there's a higher building nearby, and how important is grounding the antenna for the static buildup? Would it be a big problem if you don't do this? Good question. This is a really good question. So I have a grounding video, and I'm still learning. I've gotten lots of people challenging the setup, or at least the first setup that I had. And then so I took the feedback and listened and researched a little bit more and made it better the second time. And I'm still iterating on that. And so that's why I appreciate the feedback that we've been getting on this. So let's answer the first question. How important would be grounding the antenna if there is a higher building nearby? I would say that is irrelevant. Lightning can strike anywhere. Yes, there's a favor, it does tend to favor higher spots, but I wouldn't trust that. I would still put in the system. So lightning isn't the only thing that you should be concerned about in these setups. There's general static that builds up in the system, and even think about solar storms. This will be interesting as we see what happens when the solar storms come through, and seeing if that has any impact on this network. I'm thinking it will, but I think in those instances, having these means would be helpful for protecting your equipment in the long term. So I think that having a higher building nearby is irrelevant. How important is grounding the antenna for static buildup? I'd say absolutely important. I've seen signal improvement, at least for my TV setup that I have, because I have them on the same mast, and just in general, it's a good thing to reduce the amount of static discharge. I may be speaking that this is wrong and just wrong thinking, but I kind of look at it as like almost like an invisibility cloak. Is if you're properly grounded, it's going to help you kind of disappear into the landscape a little bit more, and not be a target, if you will. But static buildup still can happen through wind, and maybe some other events. So it is still, in general, from my research, a good thing to do, and should be done. Are you taking a risk at your earnings? Probably, but report it, share it. That's how we grow the best setup and go from there. Do you know if it's possible to get IoT devices that will utilize your Helium network to increase your earnings? Oh yeah. So this is the intent of the whole network. I mean, long term, I think that more of the earnings will come from these devices. So I happen to have some friends that had some extra devices, so they sent me these guys. And I don't know if these are hot commodity or not, but these are tabs. So this one is a location one, and this is a humidity sensor. So this is the data that's being emitted from these. It's already pre-charged with data credits. And so as those data credits go out and come back, or go out, get received by an antenna, not just mine, any antenna on the Helium network, then it rewards those people for having their hotspots live. And this is, in the end, this is like coverage mapping that they're talking about. This is going to verify who has actually really good reception. So these are really cool. I haven't experimented with these much yet, but coverage mapping is a really cool idea, and I want to support that as well. I thought about even just driving around someday and just mapping out certain things. So yeah, I don't believe you can get these right now. But you can build your own, and I know that there are websites out there that are making it available for people to either build their own or buy them. So this is the intent, though, is that as those data credits are bought, then these devices will emit, and that actually creates the economics, the end economics of the Helium network. Does anyone know why the new hotspot, especially in China, have been syncing for 4 days now? If you're not aware, Bobcat shipped 2,000 hotspots to within China. So they're already headquartered in China, I guess. And so they shipped 2,000 of these hotspots out to China, and they've been coming online. So they are syncing, and I think we're going to figure out how it actually works. China has different regulations for how their internet operates, and I'm not even aware of all the intricacies of that. So when I say they're syncing, I've seen just syncing problems anywhere in the world from the people that I've talked to, just being on Wi-Fi, and that it can take a long time. So that's something to keep in mind. Thanks for the Jim and John Hamilton. Thank you for the support for grounding. Yeah, you should do it, or you risk losing all of your equipment. Is what they said. So really recommend grounding. It's the safest way. You still may lose stuff, but again, it's about mitigation. And I had a comment on my original grounding, and it hasn't changed much, but they're like, oh, this guy's it's gonna go straight through your roof and burn everything and burn your house down. And I'm like, quite possibly, but that's a risk of, like, I mean, anytime that could happen. Of course, with having an antenna, that's a little bit more heightened, but we put the grounding in there for a reason. And hopefully, as it, if I go with my invisibility cloak idea, that it does support that, and that you can get that grounding does help, at least in some way, some way or some form. All right, I think that's all the questions I have in the chat right now, Discord right now. I also have a couple questions that I queued up for just to talk about in general. I'm not seeing very many. I guess if you're in Discord, you can at me, and then it'll draw attention to it. Of course, if you've got this if you got the chat interface open up on YouTube, then you can ask there too. Okay, so I wrote a backlog of these. So best miner. I get asked, what's the best miner? Just tell me it. I don't know. Like, I seriously have gotten the original hotspot and then the rack miner, which is functioning as the people's hotspot right now. So I don't know. I can't tell you what the best miner is. What about Nebra? What about Bobcat? I don't know, because I don't have the units, and they are sending them. They've liked what I've been doing with YouTube and that beginner mindset that I try and espouse. I don't have the answers on, what is the best miner. However, my general answer for this is the Helium network dictates the earnings, and that there are only a few things that you can control in your hotspot setup. One is your power, which is kind of like, it needs power. Internet availability. So whether you're on Wi-Fi or you're on Ethernet has some factor into how you could perform, especially if you get elected to consensus. I definitely recommend that you're on an Ethernet connection. And then your antenna. That's the only other thing that you can really change in your setup to increase or affect, I should say, to affect your earnings and hopefully increase it. But you got to remember that these miners are manufactured and certified to work with the antenna that they're given, so, or that they're shipped with. So when we make these modifications, we're kind of playing with whatever comes up. And I've seen people throwing on a bunch of different antennas on there. So really, when you're asking what's the best miner and they're not intended to have one function better than the other. Now, if one is subject to heat failure more, like we just don't know right now how these things are going to perform over the lifespan of the product. Obviously, if you stick an indoor intended one outside, it could get rained on and break right away, So there's some thought with at least the Nebra ones that they've been touting as the outdoor units that they will function more, have better longevity. Of course, that still is, every device that gets manufactured still has to be subject to all the elements and testing. And hopefully they're doing, at least I worked for a company at one time that was doing this type of testing, salt fog chamber testing. They would go through heat chamber testing. And even in that, they would take it and go through freeze thaw cycles. So over time, that general process of expansion and contraction in the circuit boards would cause problems. And there was things like silver migration and other such things. I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm a computer scientist, so at least by education. So, but just being around that, I got to pick up some of those terms. So I would love to see some of the results. I think that would be great on the manufacturer's parts to produce some of these kinds of videos of showing what their stuff is doing and the tolerances of how it functions over time. Let's see here. What are my thoughts on the Bobcat? Yeah, I don't know. It's a miner. That's all I know about it right now. I haven't seen one in my hands. I can't operate one. We'll have to see what happens. Maybe watching how they're acting. I feel like if anybody's going to know anything, it's going to be Helium's going to be knowing and communicating with them about how they're operating. They've already been in testing. They have already been approved. So I think that in the sense that they're acknowledging that every miner is equal. So it's just in how we use it or the placement of these hotspots. So I feel bad because in some part, it would be nice to say, oh, this is the best manufacturer. But in reality right now, we just don't have enough information to particularly get behind one thing or another. So, and even then, let's say if one had a particular weakness to heat or something like that, then we just surface that and say, okay, this is how we mitigate it. So, or protect it or whatever, or change, over time is these are the things we need to do given that piece of information. But of course, we just don't know yet how these will work in the wild. And again, that's another reason why I'm indoor miners for right now is my preferred mode. I'd rather be mining than not with a broken miner. Have I ordered from Nebra? I have not. The only ones that I ordered back last fall was with CalChip, though, so the rack miners. That's the only two that I've ordered. And then from doing this YouTube channel, they all the manufacturers, even Helium, and their marketing department reached out and said, "Hey, I really like what you're doing. We want to send you a miner so that you can test and share the results." So all these questions that you're asking, hopefully by me getting these miners, we'll be able to send it out. Well, then there was a supply chain crunch. And so now you have two problems. It's like, oh, we want to share, we want to use the hotspot, do the unboxings and all that kind of stuff. But then we also, personally, I'm like, man, there's quite a lot of people that are frustrated by the supply chain problem, and I'm happy that I've gotten a miner of my own to use. And so what if we could, kind of pay it forward or HNT it forward? And so that's how the people's hotspot was, so that we could get more people experimenting with this and getting the word out. So that's one of the things that I decided to get behind. So as soon as I get those miners, I will definitely do the unboxing videos, use them, see how they perform in the wild, and I absolutely share those results. Have I used the chat feature to get in touch with other hosts around me? So I think I did create an account. I haven't logged in for a while. I would think it would notify me if somebody messaged me, but I just haven't reached out to anybody yet. It's a good call. If you're trying to develop a community and help others around you increase their earnings, maybe get on that site. If somebody wants to drop the link in the chat, that would help get more people on there. I think that they were debating about whether to send messages on the chain or off the chain. I think that there was even a HIP suggested. I guess in my mind, it would be better handled off the chain, just because I guess personally, I'm not interested in receiving the messages through my app. I think that that's a perfect thing to do off chain. Shout out to the Helium Hotspot podcast. It's been great information to listen to and get educated on the HIPs that are going through the system. Let's see here. What else? What do I think about the Helium IoT infrastructure? So this is my first foray into IoT. I know that they've been talking about it, for over a decade. It's been really, really interesting to watch and see it grow. I like the idea of it being decentralized. I like the ability, even in a pandemic, to do something else and still get outside my house, but work on my house. So getting up on my roof, I told my wife yesterday when I was getting up, I'm getting on the roof again. She's like, "Why? Haven't you been up there enough?" No. So she doesn't understand all the reasons of why I keep experimenting, and this is what's got me this far. So I keep experimenting and keep going back up there and tweaking. So I think it's a good thing, though. I think it's a really quick way to grow the infrastructure we need for the Internet of Things. And I like the ideas, and I talked about two of them yesterday on my video, but I'll mention them just briefly. One person wanted to monitor a beehive health. And so I think about something like this is just a humidity sensor. As far as I understand, it could do temp too, I think. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong there. But knowing the temperature and the humidity and even if there's noise, I guess that there was in the article that someone else linked me on Twitter, they said that that there's a particular frequency or buzzing volume that is indicative of a queen being around, and so that's a good thing that people want to monitor. So that's a cool application, and I love the idea of keeping tabs up on a beehive or a field that needs moisture sensors. The other idea I thought about yesterday was having a temp sensor in a car, temp GPS sensor, and then some sort of audio sensor to detect when a child was potentially locked in a vehicle, and detecting some sort of amount of crying or screaming or something like that, or just even general noise, so that some sort of warnings could be sent out, or if it is crying for over 15 minutes or something like that, then maybe it could even auto forward the notification to maybe some authorities who could do a well check on it. I remember reading the book Creativity Inc. and they were talking about, and so if you aren't familiar with it, it's this kind of the story of Pixar. And in there's a chapter about one of the animators, one of the employees for Pixar was it was their day to drop the baby off at daycare, and they had been grinding. I believe it was on Toy Story 2, if I'm not mistaken. And the grind was so hard and they were so tired, but they had committed to doing it, that they literally forgot that the baby was in the back seat. And they got to work and then realized it, I think, an hour later or something like that. And of course they ran out there and the baby was fine, but it was a very culture defining moment for Pixar, and that they never wanted to have that kind of grind again. And so I know that there's a lot of organizations out there that have made similar realizations. And so that was kind of another reason why I thought about this little sensor would be amazing. Literally, and as fast as we're scaling this network, if we can get that sensor made really quickly, we can literally save lives this summer. So really want to call out to the community, let's make it happen. I'm not in it to make money. Let's just make it happen. I have young kids, so I could just imagine how any parent would take that, and it's just awful. So let's see here. All right, on to more questions. I am confused with the antenna's ranges. Any good to upgrade the stock? Yeah, so it depends on what. So we kind of talked about that near, and I'll probably do a video on this exclusively, and just talking about just how the antennas work outdoors, and what placement works, like all those influences that are factoring in. So very quickly, off the top of my head here, definitely is how far are you from your other hotspots? How high is your antenna? And what else is important in this? If there's cover like trees or trying to go through roofs, I know that even if there's a screen over the window, that can really mess with your signal. So definitely recommend doing your research there and experimenting. Maybe you get a cheap antenna just to see if it works indoors. And that's actually how I started this. Is I experimented for too long. I think I put it like 2 weeks in this window, and then I did another 2 weeks in that window. And if I would have just did 1 week experiments and then made some shifts, then I could have been earning more quickly. Expecting an outdoor rack miner in May, planning to use the short stock cable to connect to the miner. Do you recommend it using better quality cable? It all depends if you're outdoor. I think maybe I don't have that here with me. I thought I did, but I know the cable you speak of, and I'm looking around and I cannot find it. So I'm very frustrated because I would love to show it to you. So from what I understand, that cable is probably not intended for outdoor usage. You can use it, and I used it for months outdoors. It's probably not going to last as long, and it may be more susceptible to the static elements or just weather elements, that kind of stuff. So I would recommend upgrading, and so that's why I have these. These are functional equivalents of that, and then I think that these have a little bit less loss. And these are LMR 400 cables. And somebody asked me how flexible these were one time. So I'm going to get it on video of me actually trying to flex this. So you can see that they're pretty flexible. There is quite a bit of resistance on this. I'd say kind of tantamount to a water hose, maybe a little bit stronger. But I mean, you can see even on my video of the grounding setup, I have these looped just like this on the side of my house. And so you can get pretty tight loops with these, obviously, like this. You can probably go a little bit tighter too to do that. But yeah, that's how flexible they are with these. But I do recommend switching out and having a bit more robust cable in the long term. what do you think about the Match X M2 Pro miner? I don't know anything about that. I've seen some comments about it. I don't know. Is it related to Helium or not? I don't know. So I'll probably just skip that one for now. I want to use the IoT network to order an automatic car to come to my house and deliver where I need to go and get me back and just pay with DC. Oh, yeah. That's a cool thing. I think I was listening to a video or a podcast about that idea. And there's some really interesting applications long term to the car not even being really something you own. Maybe you actually get paid for it to just park in your garage or on your patio or on your driveway overnight, and you have the apparatuses to connect it up. And maybe that's the thing that you really get paid for, that they need you to do, is just plug in, and then it mines crypto while it's sitting in your driveway. And then at the end of the day, it's done with its charge, and then you unplug it, and then it goes off and makes money for you, I guess, is the kind of the thinking about it. It's super futuristic and super cool. I like this idea. Of course, there's, it's like kind of Uber, but different too. I don't know. There's really, really cool applications. I'm probably not hitting all the points to it, but I think that it would be a really neat thing to have, if you need a car, to just order one to, come up and take you where you need to. And it'd be really cool because, I'm going to do, it's spring, so I'm going to do landscaping on my yard, and I want a pickup this time rather than a regular car. Or no, I'm going on a long drive and it's just me, so I want the most efficient car possible, type of thing. I think that that'd be pretty cool application for the technology. Do you know what outdoor antenna I can buy for the Nebra indoor hotspot? So I've been getting a lot of these questions about what antenna can I buy with this hotspot. So really all you need to know is there's a bunch of things, but the connector, and then the frequency that the antenna supports. So one of these cables is RP-SMA, the other one is SMA, and you need to know what that end is on your hotspot and what the end is on your antenna, and then just understanding what the frequency of the miner, that it matches up with the frequency of the antenna. So that's the stuff that you need to look at. And worldwide, there's different frequencies. So really investigate what is the difference, or what antennas work with your hotspot. And of course, in the US, it's 915 megahertz. So you really want to get your antennas and such targeted for that frequency. Otherwise, indoor, outdoor, it doesn't really matter, as long as you're in whatever country is using that particular frequency. As long as you have an antenna that matches up, you can use that antenna. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but there are differences between omnidirectional antennas and directional antennas. So RP, SMA, and I'm in EU, so frequency 868, right? Yes. The one caveat I'll say is that there are hotspots coming out that will have an SMA connector instead of an RP SMA. So you need to check the literature. And I'm so thankful that people have been hounding the manufacturers in there, because this is a good question, because I was down for 2 days because I messed up myself. It wasn't even the manufacturer's fault. Somebody told me RP SMA and I ordered an SMA cable. So do check that out on your miner. Oh man, I would hate to say what that is. I need to get that on a list and then put it so I can just pull it out every time and be 100% right. And we know that the miners out so far, the original hotspot and the rack miner, both have RP SMA connectors. So until we actually see what the hotspot is in reality, when I'm holding it in my hand, then I could say, see, it's RP SMA or it's SMA. So I will share that as soon as I know more. All right. I have 2 ATBI antenna. You need to know the spot, because a higher drive antenna will run into issues of missing nearby hotspots. So okay. Were you able to fix your issue? So some of the higher DBI antennas can overshoot hotspots that are closer. And I would say it's not even hotspots that are closer, but these little devices, if they're emitting signal, might not be able to receive the results, the signal from those devices if it's being overshot. So that's really important if you put that, consider that in your setup. And so this might be is if you have one miner or one hotspot that is close range, let's say you really want to go for the H&T, so you want to provide maximum coverage, right? So then you might go with a higher dBi antenna, given all those influences that are there, but you want to go for max coverage. But then think about the coverage that you're missing out locally. So then you might want to use another hotspot at that 300 meter range with a different signal cone shape type of thing. So I know that the 3 dBi is a little bit more circular shaped. So you might want to look at that, space just away to cover your own self, and then be able to provide 100% coverage even at your own if you had one of these devices. So that's something to think about. And so far, I think it's been a little bit more windier today. But I think that the fixes I made improved the results, at least on the north end where I was losing some witnesses. But I have not seen the short ones come online yet. So that might be a reason why I need to change back to the Rack 8 dBi, because that has a little bit different signal shape. So might be able to pick those back up and get my earnings back up. So this is experimentation. And this is what I think it's Gristle King. He was the one that messaged me. He wrote a really great article on where to place hotspots. And he said, yeah, this was the friend. And then it was talking about his friend was doing the results on the Nearson isn't the best one. And I'd say, I'm not willing to say that this one is the best one or not the best one and don't use this ever. It's very complex. There's a lot of influences into placing an antenna. What tool for line of sight do you use? I do not use one yet. I know that there's been one mentioned in the Discord quite a bit of times, and I haven't had a need to use it yet. When I start placing maybe a wider network, I will investigate that. That Cloud RF is the one that I had heard about, but I have not used it myself. I think there was one time where I went to log in and I thought that there was like if you had to pay to use it or something like that. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe one of the ones that was recommended was behind a paywall or something like that. You had to sign up for it or something. Have I tried to connect two antennas? I have not. I know that when you do that, you have loss. You introduce more loss, so you'll lose on coverage. So that's something to consider in experiment. I haven't tried it. Go for it. Share the results. Well, we are over an hour, and this has been super exciting. I haven't gotten through all the other things that I thought about talking about. I could go more into what are the weak points of my setup. I talked about one of them. You asked this question, or somebody has multiple miners in one place. What about Wi-Fi versus Ethernet? I talked about the outdoor antenna education and what are all the influences when I say, well, it depends. It's contextual. That's what it needs a video by itself to answer that question. Where did I get everything? I've been trying to do a lot more of that, of linking to the things that I've been buying, but could always do a better job in that. Let's see here. And then port forwarding or internet security, what does that look like? Talking about that. I'll answer a few more questions, then we'll probably call it, because there are probably a lot of people that wouldn't want to watch an hour-long video of this. So we'll call it short here and maybe give it 5 more minutes. All right. Should I order an N-type to N-type cable to go from the antenna to the lightning arrestor? Yes, that's what I use. Now, if you have a longer cable and then you have like an indoor miner, but if you're going to an enclosure, then that one's a really tough one. It all depends on probably how long your cable is. I think that they recommend that anything over 5 feet, or you don't have a cable longer than 5 feet. Otherwise, you're introducing a lot of loss into the setup. So, but it is recommended that as low as you're going to get, you definitely should have a lightning arrestor before you get to your miner to try and protect it a little bit more. And so as low as it can possibly go to get connected up. So if that means that you need to have, like for my setup, I have a 27-foot cable, and then I have my lightning arrestor, and then I have a 5-foot cable. And the 5-foot cable actually goes inside the house. So that's how I broke it up, is I moved the lightning arrestor I had it right on my antenna. And then, of course, a lot of people provide the feedback that that's not the best way to do it. You want to have it as low as possible. So that's why I split up that cable and got 2 cables to do it. And actually, that's why I have these 2 5-foot cables, is because of that. If I need to switch out the cable or move the hotspot to an enclosure up on my mast, then I have these available for me. So these are nice, short, and easy things that I can quick swap out. And then, of course, it hits that. Now, this may be a problem, like you kind of brought up, is, well, this wouldn't quite have room for the lightning arrestor. How would I connect that up? So we'll have to see. It all depends on your enclosure and seeing what those setups are. I know that Parley Labs has their own enclosure, and then Rack is also doing their own enclosure, or something to that degree. So investigate that. It will help you with your setup. Okay, let's see here. That answers that. Yeah, I think that's all the questions that came up. There was one other that came in mind, but it's blanking out of my head right now. Well, thank you. If you have appreciated this, make sure you drop a like and a subscribe. If you got feedback on this, or if you want to chat me up individually that I said something wrong in there, please do. I'm definitely trying to learn as much, and there's a big caveat over all my videos, is that I could be wrong at this moment in time, and I just don't know. So ignorance is bliss, right? So we keep sharing this back and forth with each other and growing our knowledge, helping each other. It's all to help everybody earn HNT. That's why I started doing this, was sharing my results so others could make more HNT as well. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for participating and asking the great questions, and take care. Peace out, everyone.